In World War II, we were producing a B-24 Liberator bomber every hour. Every 64, every 65 minutes, you're building real missiles. How many missile tests did you do in 2025?
We've done over 20. Let's go back to the fundamentals of what used to work for America in the Apollo era and how we would develop things and do that for missiles.
Why do we even need hypersonic missiles?
This isn't like the end of the primes. This is just a new stage because frankly, competition just breeds good results. Like that's what makes America great.
Hi everyone, I'm Connor Love, and this is the Investment Memo, the show where founders reveal the stories behind their multi-billion-dollar deals. Today, I'm joined by Brian Hargis, the co-founder and CEO of Castellian, a company redefining how we build the next generation of military systems with hypersonic missiles that can be manufactured faster and at a massive scale. Today, we're hearing from Bryon and how he grew a hardware company to a multi-billion-dollar valuation in less than 3 years. What makes Castellian different and how they're building for the next decade of American exceptionalism. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, Brian, here's the memo.
Do I want to see this memo?
I will share with you the memo. I'd love your reactions. I'll highlight a couple of my strong points, but take a look.
Well, I like where you start. A top 3 person in the world when it comes to selling to the federal government.
Yeah, wow. I think I should have put a little bit broader than that. Galaxy? I don't know.
Well, as far as we know.
Yeah, I guess. So Castellian is changing the entire paradigm of what a missile or munition is. You have reached the point as a company, what I would describe as that inflection point that few emerging defense companies have reached. You have real contracts. There's real pull from the customer here, and you're building real missiles to execute on this mission. You have $350 million more dollars. Congratulations on the Series B. Fill us in. Like, how have you got here? What's happened in the last year?
Well, thank you, by the way. Appreciate that. We've done 20 test flights in the past year. We've won contracts with the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and several others yet to be announced. Yeah. We're busy developing our weapon system. We're building a 1,000+ acre site in New Mexico, which is just the start. I think that Castellian is demonstrating that we can develop these hypersonic weapons on a timeline that the country has not done in a while, and that things can be affordable, and that we can be producing at scale. Like the country is very good at producing at scale on the commercial side. There's no reason that the warfighters shouldn't enjoy that as well.
From the investor's perspective, it's always been a market. We've always been building this. It's always been a need. You and your co-founders left SpaceX. You clearly decided to do something incredibly ambitious. Where did you start? I mean, you started with mission in mind, obviously, but from a company perspective, like, what did it look like?
When you're in defense for a long time, like regardless of whatever area that you're currently working, you get kind of the broader picture from going to conferences and talking to various people within the government. And it was very apparent to me, I was always a space person previously. It would have been very much up my alley to go start a space company, of which I knew a lot about and had all the contacts for. But we were focusing on what was most important in my mind to the country. And that really comes from, if you want to have a credible deterrence, all portions of what they call the kill chain have to work together. And it was focusing on what piece of that, in my mind, was not as good as it should be. And good being defined by the ability for the capabilities, how good is a missile in general, but also how much do they cost, how many can we make as a country? None of that is in very good shape at the moment.
Maybe just level set for us, like, how bad is it for the country? I don't mean geopolitically, I don't mean from a conflict perspective, but the layperson is like, we gotta be building these things, right? Like, we have to have this capability in some way, shape, or form. Like, how dire was it really before you started Castellian?
It's kind of the same talking point regardless of what you talk about: launch vehicles, satellites, missiles. The country is very good at producing extremely exquisite capability, but doing it over a very long time period at almost obscene cost. And it's really, in my mind, a byproduct of the process with which we go and develop it. if you haven't been in aerospace and defense, it's almost hard to describe like the decision, like kind of the process of the decision making. Because if you started like a car company and behave like this, you would be instantly out of business.
100%.
You'd never be able to afford to bring a product to market. And so really what we're focused on at Castellian is, let's go back to the fundamentals of what used to work for America in the Apollo era and how we would develop things and do that for missiles, specifically hypersonic missiles, because there's certain capabilities that they have that's very attractive from a capability perspective, but really what it's bringing is, how do you go develop these complex engineering in these systems to function, but do it in a way that leads to something affordable, to something that we can produce at scale?
From a product perspective, like, why do we even need hypersonic missiles? Why does the military, why does the government need what you're building?
It comes down to really 3 basic things: range, speed, survivability.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to shoot from an extremely far distance because we don't want to put the warfighter in harm's way, so shooting as far as possible.
Yeah.
You want to have, you want to get to the target quickly because most things in the military are mobile, they move. So when you shoot, it's not necessarily going to be there if it takes a very long time for the weapon to, in flight, to get to where it's going. And you want it to be survivable, meaning you want the weapon to survive to the target so that it's credible.
I mean, what, the speed is, you know, the heat of the system is what, something like over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit? I mean, this is a hard
Yes,
technical
depending
thing
on
to
the
build.
speed, yes.
Yeah.
And that's a very tough environment for anything to survive in, because it's not just the temperature, it's also the fact that you're in the atmosphere, you're in oxygen. Oxygen tends to degrade material systems, and solving that challenge, keeping the electronics and the weapon cool enough to work, and having everything hold together to the end of flight and have a delivered effect is important.
When you started Castelian, you went on hard mode, like you said, pretty quickly.
Hypersonic missiles is not the easy way, for sure.
Both technically and to sell as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. When we started the business, I very much thought possibly we quit our jobs to become unemployed, which was not a great feeling, but I believed in it. We believed in it. I thought it was important.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's one of these things, you know, I said it multiple times already, but what you're doing is not only technically hard. I mean, again, I remember when I first showed up to your factory, and I call it a factory, but in my mind in 2023, it was like, it looked like the post office. And I always reference it to you as the post office. Yeah. It's not a post office. Like, I think it was like, what, some Boeing black box, you know,
I think it was a Teledyne facility that would house, because we had like this safe vault in the middle that was oddly placed, but I think that's where they housed the black boxes.
I'm gonna call it the post office in my head, because I just like, you know, is cooler. But I remember showing up to your office. This is in 2023. I think the first thing that I thought as you walked me around and showed me what you were building was fundamentally what you were doing was not about incremental improvement. It was about a stepwise order of value that you're not just adding to, you know, back to the thesis you talked about, like peace through deterrence, but you were in the process of doing something that no one else was doing. And I think like that ambition and that big swing just captured me immediately. And in the back of my head, I'm like, these guys are either crazy or they're going to do something really, really exciting. Maybe both. I don't know. We'll find out. And then I think the second thing that stood out to me, and again, like we've known each other for 2 years now. You know, I don't say this lightly, but you know, I feel like you are one of the few founders who internalizes the mission of your company, who truly cares about not only what you're building and why you're building it, but I see it every day and how you show up with your employees and how you know, hire your engineers and do these things. And like, when you're building in this category, like, yes, this is about doing something really technically hard, but to me, like, you know, you and I just had a conversation about this, like the stakes are bigger than, you know, winning the contract or you know, whatever, or passing the, you know, test. And at the same time, we think the outcome is both really big for the company and also really big for America. So that's important to us.
It was important to me because I do think that anybody with a huge idea that things could be radically different, because like the problem is such that like a 10% improvement, yes, that would be good, but that's not going to fix the problem. Yeah. It always looks crazy at the start. And it, certainly when we founded the business, you know, back in late 22, early 23, just doing a hardware business at the time was considered very, you know, out of vogue. And then it became, and your only business is, your customer base is going to just be the federal government. and eventually foreign militaries, but far down the road, like that was almost considered uninvestable, which was a lot of the feedback we got. So like, why would you go do that? But the importance was obvious to me and to, Andrew, Sean, and everybody else that joined us early on about how important this was for the country. As a startup, you can't offer the same compensation like cash-wise for other more established businesses. So all you have is the mission.
Yeah.
And selling that vision of, if we do this, this is the outcome, this is how important it will be. And you kind of gather a coalition of great employees that are on that journey with you.
The mission's important, but also what's really important is, does the customer understand how you're building and what you're building? This is maybe the second or first point in the memo, but I do believe you're one of the best 3 people in the world at selling to government. How? Like, how have you done it today? You have your famous 80-15-5 rule. Yeah. You have, your kind of, sales first product orientation of what you do. Like, educate us. What's the secret of Brian Hargis here?
It certainly wasn't easy, but I do think that the way that we approached it, it was just coming in, saying what we would do, going and doing it, coming back, and then again demonstrating, here's what we did. Now here's what we're going to do for the next 6 months, and then repeatedly doing that. Now, we had some very early believers because, of course, like when you sell in any large enterprise deal, which selling to the government is, a lot of it's based on reputation. And I had contacts and people did know me before. Unfortunately, I was in the space business, so they didn't directly translate to missiles. But we won new champions by doing the same exact playbook. Yeah. And that has led, of course, with the demonstrations of all our flight tests, it becomes more and more real and easier to press the I believe button on their part so that we can win the next tranche of contracts. So it's been decades of doing this with the government in various roles. Yeah. But I think what is the secret? To the dismay of some of my co-founders, I am very open, and I'm open with our customer, because at the end of the day, doing business with anybody is really about trust. Yes, you are selling some product from your company that you represent, but at the end of the day, they're buying from you as a person. And so my career kind of through sales, it became very apparent, I'm really selling my own reputation. Yeah. And you have to be honest. You have to tell people, they're smart people. They're going to know if something's not right. It would be best for me to just tell them what's not right, what we're doing to fix it, and how we're going to win together. And I'm very, very transparent. And I think my, experience at selling at Johns Hopkins APL, they didn't call it selling. They call it being a program manager, because they don't do sales, but they do sales. Yeah. And then at SpaceX, it's really, I try to listen to what's the problem. Because a lot of people come in and sell a product, but they don't ever ask who they're trying to sell to. What exactly is your problem? The rule is 80% of the people are kind of don't care if you're there or not there, but they're not going to step out for you. 15% of the folks are literally mad at you for existing. And there's 5% of the folks that are willing to be an early champion, and your job is to seek them out and find them. Yeah. Because you're not going to break through with something new if you don't find that early adopter. And a lot of people give up way too early, or don't have enough meetings, because you're going to take 20 no's to just get to somebody that will work with you and give you a chance, and then you begin that journey of that relationship.
I think the other thing that just is so important here is you need to be able to back up what you're talking about by the actual technical progress. And this is again back to what got us to lean in at the Series B. It was already privileged to be a part of your business, sitting there and kind of watching you play out, test after test after test. I mean, what does Sean call it? Desert rats. You guys are literally just in the desert, iterating on a new seeker, a new fin, a new kind of separation mechanism, a new material on the nose cone. And when I saw that happening at the pace that it was happening, a couple things were apparent to me. I didn't have the crystal ball to know exactly when everything was going to come together, but when you see that type of stepwise change improvement, one, we as an investor see that, but then back to the point about the government is the government starts to see that. You can actually show them, aside of just this PowerPoint that you have, roughly how many missile tests did you do in 2025? And you'll do some more, like tens. You know what I mean? It's been impressive to see.
We've done over 20.
Wow.
Just in 2025.
Clearly, the government is starting to change. The conditions around this market, again, like for the first time I've seen in my 10, 15, 20 career, like the DoD, the Department of War is shifting from this okay customer to this could actually be a really good customer. I mean, what are you seeing? How do you see this play out? We've seen, the Secretary of War's recent announcement on acquisitions. What's your gut of what this market will look like? And what is Castellion's role in it for the next, 5, 10, 20 years?
There definitely is a shift from a leadership level of pushing for the correct way of, in my opinion, the correct way of thinking. That you can't expect high return outcomes if you tolerate no risk.
Yeah.
Like if I could do a no risk investment and just have it, go 10x, like everybody would do that. That's not the way the world works. And I do think that from a leadership level, there has been a huge push of like, we need to re-incentivize the system. We need to change the approach and the policies that kind of get us stuck. But I will say at a individual office level, when I talk about those 5%, those 5%, they've been operating like that for the whole time they've been there. But now they're empowered, and now they're moving up. Now they're being promoted. People are skipping ranks. They're getting new roles. Fantastic. And I, as an American, I'm happy to see it, and I fully support it. So it's really that hopefully this translates to success. And by success, I don't mean like success of those new entrant companies. I mean success of delivering something of value to the warfighter. Yeah. And therefore, all of the changes and like, yes, this is the correct approach. They will continue to invest more with companies like ours, so that you get new thoughts. And this isn't like the end of the primes. This is just a new stage, because frankly, competition just breeds good results. Like that's what makes America great. There hasn't been much competition in like the defense space in a long time. It will be good for everybody that there's new blood coming in, and that you have to be good to win.
I mean, I think about this a lot. It's, what is a good business to be built? What is good for the American taxpayer? And then, ultimately, like, what is good for the safety and the security of the world? And I think, like, if this experiment, and I still call it an experiment because there's a lot of things that need to be done on the government side, I am optimistic about what the world will be, but it is a very dangerous place right now. And I think your role, like, again, just as an investor, is important to me. I mean, it's important to my wife, it's important to my kids, it's important to our families. And I think, again, we are entering into this future of a market where you have safety and security and stability that maybe you're a small part of in a way. When you work those 100-hour weeks, like, why you're doing it. You know what I mean?
100%. That's going back to the start. There are easier ways. This matters, though. And I think, like, for me, it's really, it was my kids. Like, I have 2 young kids. It's very much that I want them to have the ability to go do whatever they want in life. Like, if they want to join the military, I fully support that. But if they want to do something else, I'd like to create the world where they can have that opportunity. They don't have to. And I think the way that we're progressing in this space, just in defense in general, and the amount of money given like the outcomes and the schedule and the costs, it's not going to lead to good outcomes if we don't do better. And I think the current administration, they agree. They see that. That's why we're making these changes. And I think that's why it's so incredibly important that we have success as an overall category, including the traditional primes. Like, we need to do better overall and deliver more in quicker time frames for less money, because the country has other priorities, frankly, too. Like, I want to see money spent on education like everybody else, and I want to run a balanced budget because I don't want to saddle my children with trillions of dollars of debt in the future. And I think that we can do that. As a country, we can do that. We used to do that. The commercial side of America still does that. We can lead in this regard, and I do see that Castellian can be not even a small part of this. I could see that we can be a large part of this.
A few things that I want to make sure we talk about, before we wrap up here, are a lot of the success in Castellian, but also in what we would define in this defense tech movement that's happening, is around the ability to deliver at scale. Because we all know something in prototype or something shown in an exercise is important, but at the same time, unless we have the capability across our department, It's just, doesn't really have an impact. It doesn't, keep soldiers safe. It doesn't, create a real true deterrence. You guys just announced, 1,000-acre plant in New Mexico that you're building. Talk to me about it. Like, when will we see Castelian get to that scale?
Well, dirt's moving today.
Good.
So it's going to be a roughly year-long construction process, but obviously we're trying to figure out how we can accelerate that in any way possible. Large infrastructure projects take time.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the reason there's such a focus on production is because that is what will deter our adversaries. It's not enough to have a one-off capability. You need to show that it's an enduring capability and we can outproduce you on any scale, so that don't try.
Yeah.
That way neither side has to build more of these weapons or use more of these weapons, but they need to know that you're credible in doing it. Castellian's going to focus on that. We just announced a site in New Mexico, as you mentioned.
Yep.
We have the option on more sites. We're not done at just one. Mm-hmm. But the progress that we're making with like all of our test flights, it's not just developing the weapon itself and iterating through that. It's also the fact that the process of doing those test flights, we're actually building the hardware.
Yeah.
Because to just design something and think that you're going to get it right the first time and then make a producible, mass manufacturable design, of course that's what everybody is trying to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that in real life. You have to give it multiple tries,
Yep.
and then you have to change the design based upon what you got wrong and do it again. And sometimes we're throwing away perfectly functional designs that work great, but they're never going to hit the cost or scalability targets, and therefore, if it's not going to achieve that long-term goal, we have to start over.
And I've talked to Andrew about this a million times. Like 1,000 acres is not a small project to build, to say the least.
I am a bit jealous when there was more free land and,
Yeah.
or at least freely available land. It wasn't free, but
Well,
I do think, like, from that perspective of making that change against the market, like, we have a long way to go, and
Yeah.
not to claim that we're anywhere near there, but that drive and that vision and everybody on board of the company to make it happen, I feel very hopeful that that change will happen, especially given the market shift. Like, this category as a whole is now investable.
Yeah.
That was not necessarily the case, 3 years ago when we started. Certainly didn't feel like it. I have a high degree of optimism, though, that the future is going to be very bright if we can pull this off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearkening back to what you said previously. It's like, we did this as a country at one time.
Oh yeah, we've done it before.
I mean,
let's just do it again.
It's and I didn't steal this from Andrew, your co-founder and historian, but in World War II, we were producing a B-24 Liberator bomber.
Yeah.
Every hour, every
hour.
64, every 65 minutes.
Can you imagine that today?
I mean, what? Like, how many missiles have some of the old school? I mean, 1, 2, 10, like total a year or something like that. I mean,
For the bigger ones, yeah.
It's an order of magnitude change that you're looking to bring.
But it's not impossible.
Yeah.
America can do this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, I think inherently I'm an optimist. Inherently, I know what you're doing is really hard. But I think the work you've done to date, and again, there's a lot more work left to do. We all know that. But like I said, I'm an optimist.
The story, the vision to put that out there, early on, it was hard to kind of have the audacity to say those things because you would almost be laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
You're going to be a new prime and do what?
Yeah.
We're getting much further along in that journey, but I can tell you internally, that vision and faith has always been there.
Yeah.
It gets easier to tell that full picture without being laughed out of the room the more progress we make.
Yeah. A lot of times one of the things you don't share as an investor is you don't share the references that you get on people. And I don't have something
You did. You did.
I shared a little bit, but I think the snippets and the summaries that I want to just regurgitate to you, and again, some of these are my words, not direct words from others, but when I asked who Bryon is, I got a similar version of he's your uncle who you really trust and you really like and you always want him around, but he's kind of your uncle, you know what I mean? And it's this weird thing that was so is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I think as I've got to know you, you're authentic. You show up, you say what you do, you do what you say, like you said. And I think what you've done in your previous career and what you're doing today with your employees, I mean, again, what people say is, Bryon empowers me. Bryon enables me on the mission that we're building. And when you're building a company that is as important as you're building today, I give you kudos to that. Like, you got a lot going on, and the way you show up to other people is not lost in the market. And I just want to make sure you know that, we appreciate that, and your employees appreciate that.
I do think like the snippets you shared that other people said, I was like, that's fairly accurate. But I do think you have to empower your team, because I can't make every decision. They're the expert on their system.
Yeah.
I can't helicopter in and decide better. I can make risk calls, et cetera, but you have to trust your team. And I'm not going to get it right 100% of the time. They're not going to get it right 100% of the time. I don't expect that. What I expect is that we're accelerating the pace of learning, that they're learning. Like if they made a mistake, that we don't make the same mistake again. Those are kind of the expectations internally. It's not absolute perfection 100% of the time. That's how you become, as a culture internal, that's how you become so risk adverse that everybody freezes, because the best way to never have any risk is to not do anything.
Of course, yeah. Well, congrats on the Series B.
Thank you.
It's impressive what you've done to date. More importantly, I think it's going to be impressive what you do in the future. It's been a pleasure for us to be a part of this journey, me personally, but also us at Lightspeed, and I'm excited for what you do for our country and what you do in the future. So
thank you for believing in us and being part of the journey. Yeah. We're gonna do it together.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Absolutely.